It is somewhat comical and tragic to watch liberal women go on social media and complain about, well, where are all the real men at? Where are all the men that want to be a protector and a provider? It's like, you told them they're toxic, and some of them believed you. Culture will eventually produce the sort of men it's asking for. And right now it's asking for weak, emasculated men. And it turns out nobody likes the results.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Lila Rose podcast. Today we're going to have on Nick Freitas, who's a Virginia State Delegate. He actually just won his re-election last night in Virginia. There were races across the country. And he's also a podcaster and a YouTuber. He talks a lot on masculinity and marriage, so we're going to get into that. Quick note, please pray and redouble your efforts with us at Live Action for the Pro-Life Movement because there were some losses. I mean, Nick did win his re-election, but Ohio, Proposition or Issue 1 passed, which enshrines abortion in the state constitution. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I'm sharing them online. If you get Live Action's emails and you're part of our list, you'll see my thoughts and my kind of rehash of that. But the movement has to double down on showing abortion for what it is, an active homicide against a child. That's the only way we're going to get people to reject it if they actually know what abortion is. In this conversation with Nick, we talk about really the solution to abortion culture at large, which is strong marriages, strong men and strong women. He has a lot to share. I think it's going to be great, and I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Guys, I'm really excited about our new sponsor. Our new sponsor is Nimi Skincare, and I am a proud user of Nimi Skincare products. It's been a couple months that I've been using the products, and I absolutely love them. I'm very picky about my skincare products. I always have been. It's always been hard for me to find a line where I like multiple products, but I want to shout out some of my favorite Nimi Skincare products that I've been using every day, and I'm seeing the results. I've been using the Vitamin C Cleansing Scrub, which I love using in the evening before bed. After that, I use their Moisturizer Cream, which is amazing. It leaves my skin feeling so refreshed when I wake up. I also love their sunscreen that I put on in the morning, and it's also moisturizing, but overall, their products are fantastic. So check out NimiSkincare.com. You're also going to love that. Surprise, surprise, this is a pro-life company that shares your values, and they have best-in-class skincare products. So you can check out NimiSkincare.com today, and you can use the code Lila at checkout for 15% off your order. That's NimiSkincare.com, and you can use the code Lila for 15% off your order. Nick, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
So you just had a big day yesterday. We're filming this on a Wednesday. Yesterday was the election in Virginia as well in other states. There were some big disappointments coming from on the pro-life side, Ohio voters enshrining abortion in their state constitution. But a bright side is you just won re-election yesterday.
Well, I was certainly happy about winning re-election, but we look, to be honest, we had a tough night in Virginia as well. We weren't able to take the Senate, and we ended up losing the House by, I think at this point, 1 seat.
Ouch.
Yeah.
What's your take? So some of the folks listening have some familiarity with your background. I want to hear more about that in a moment. But what's your take? I mean, everyone is looking at what happened yesterday and really concerned about the pro-life cause, concerned about going into 2024. What's your take on it?
I think there's a lot of problems that the country is facing right now. I think there's obviously each state has individual issues with their elections that they're trying to combat and various issues which are more prominent. But I think there's a larger cultural battle that's going on right now that is undermining a lot of races across the country. I know that our speaker put in just an absolute ton of work. Governor Youngkin put in a ton of work, and individual candidates did as well. So I can't look at one individual person and say, hey, they weren't doing everything they could to potentially win. But I just think we have some underlying cultural issues that we're going to have to effectively address. And abortion is one of the major ones, if not the major one, that we're going to have to address on a cultural level as well as a legislative issue.
So I want to get into your background because one of the reasons I'm excited to have you on the show today is obviously you're a delegate in Virginia, but you're also very much doing the culture battle stuff. I mean, you have a YouTube channel. You're very big on Instagram, reaching millions of people. A lot of your messages really resonate, I think, with young men, but also young women. So let's start with a little bit about your background and how you got into politics and then how you got into influencing online, because they're sometimes the same, but also very different.
No, it was fun. I remember the first time I was doing an MC event for Family Foundation in Virginia, and they introduced me as a state delegate and social media personality. And I was like,
Nice.
What did you just call me? No, my background, I enlisted in the military right out of high school. My wife and I got married about less than a year out of high school. I was 19. She was 20. She loves that I make sure everyone knows that she was 9 months older than me. She likes to tell people that the reason why it happened that way is because when she was being born, God knew she would need a project. And so, 9 months later, I was there. But yeah, I got married right out of high school, served in the 82nd Airborne Division, 25th Infantry, and 9/11 happened. And volunteered for Army Special Forces and did a couple of combat tours over in Iraq as a Green Beret with 1st Special Forces Group. Tina and I had all 3 of our children when I was in the military, and got out in, it was June of 2009. So I had done 11 years active duty, and we ended up moving to Virginia. And my mom had been involved in politics when I was younger. She had been the head of a Republican women's organization and had been pretty active in California politics. And so that certainly got me involved. I never really thought I would run for elected office. I thought maybe I'd work on the advisory side with things like foreign policy, counterterrorism, things of that nature. And got involved locally, started working on various campaigns, and I got asked if I would run for the House of Delegates, and I said no. And
why? Why did you say no?
I think it was a couple of things. One was I was still fairly new to Virginia at that point, and the second, I thought it was important. One of the things they really beat into you in the military is understand your operational environment, especially when you're working as part of a 12-man team in a combat zone. And I wanted to actually understand the area and feel like I really understood it before I would even presume to consider something like that. The other side was I just didn't see it as something that I was going to do. Again, I like the idea of helping other people out, and initially, Tina really was not too sure about us being in the public light like that in our family and everything else, because they don't just come after you; they come after everyone. And it was about 2 years later where, Tina and a good friend of mine, Christian Hines, who's actually now my co-host on Making the Argument, they both said, "Look, Nick, you can't keep talking about the problems with this." And not be willing to actually go in there yourself. And that's always the way to get me to do something, is to make me feel like I'm not doing enough. So they talked me into it, and we did a lot of prayer over it. And I put my hat in the ring, and lo and behold, the incumbent decided to retire. And so my first election was unopposed. I've never had that privilege before or since then. But that's how I eventually got into elected office here in Virginia.
And it's been 7 years that you've been in office?
8 years. I just got reelected, so two more years to go.
Okay. So what's it like? Okay, you're the dad of 3. You're an Army vet. You are also now 8 years going strong in the House of Delegates, and you are doing a ton of stuff in the culture space, podcasting and influencing, social media influencing. And then you're also, I think, homeschooling and homesteading. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. My oldest daughter is about to turn 21, so she's graduated. We homeschooled her pretty much since kindergarten, first grade. She had 1 year where she went back into public school, and we took her right back out. And then my son just turned 18. He's finishing up his senior year, and then my youngest daughter is about to turn 16. So we've got a few years left there. But yeah, we've homeschooled, and about 2 years ago we started kind of dipping our toe in the water with homesteading, mainly because we wanted to be able to expand kind of what we were doing with our garden. We wanted our kids to have the responsibility and experience on being able to grow and raise your own food. And so it's been but I have to tell you, I came for the resilience, but I stayed for the people. If that makes sense. The homesteading community is really just a breath of fresh air. It is so nice to be able to go to one of these conferences. Homesteaders of America is a great group out here that we participate with. And seriously, like I go to Richmond and it gets depressing. And then I come out to the Homesteaders of America conference and I just feel rejuvenated. It's just great being around the people.
And you don't just have plants, though. You have real animals on your homestead, right?
We do. We've done pigs, we've done goats, we've done meat chickens, we have laying chickens, we have peacocks because we hate ourselves. They're pretty to look at, but kind of loud. And dogs and cats and stuff like that. But as far as our livestock animals, the most dangerous place for our bank account is when my youngest daughter and I go to the poultry auction, because chicken math is a real thing and it always equals multiplication. So.
So no eggs though. It's just chickens for meat.
Oh, no. We do eggs as well.
Okay.
In fact, I got to tell you, Lila, we were feeling pretty baller when the egg prices were shooting up, and we're like walking into church with you get a dozen eggs, you get a dozen eggs. It's just how we roll, right? So it's
what a work of love, just handing them out.
Yeah, it's been great.
Okay. Well, what I want to get into first, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, but I want to start with men because there is people talk about the crisis of feminism today and femininity. There's definitely a crisis of masculinity today. There's new data coming out of Pew that says that among young adults, 1/3 of women are single, but a full and astonishing 63% of young men are single. And, you have the rise of red pill online. You have the rise of, I don't know, the derogatory term is the beta male, who is just not really doing much with his life. And generally speaking, I think there's a sense of dissatisfaction. Economically, men are struggling. I know you talk about this a lot. You got married at 19. Let's start with what is your take on why we are where we are culturally with this crisis of masculinity?
So I think a lot of it has to do with, it's very easy to just pick on feminism, modern feminism. And I do think that has a lot to do with it. But I also think that there's been kind of a larger identity crisis in the country, both on a national level, because we don't generally agree on our shared history. We don't generally agree on where we are in the present. And so we don't agree on where we should be going. And modern feminism's contribution to that has been this idea of making this a battle between men and women. I think early on feminism, where it was the idea of, hey, women should have equal rights before the law and they should be able to vote and own property. I think that's stuff that are all noble objectives. When it comes into the realm now of second and especially third wave feminism, where it's this idea that men are the enemy. And I really think it's also created this idea that the state is the ally of women against men. That's created a great deal of hostility and frustration, I think, between the sexes. It's also created a great deal of frustration with respect to what is men's proper role within society. I think when men look at it as something where they have an obligation to be husbands and to be fathers and to be good husbands and fathers, to be protectors, to be providers, they feel like they have a place in the world. And that's an incredibly important position for any civilization. You don't want a lot of young, frustrated men running around that don't see any sort of future for themselves. That tends to yield really, really bad results for society, and I would say for women specifically. By the same token, you've had this idea that masculinity, this is one of the things that the left, and I always distinguish between the left and liberals, but this is one of the things the left always does, and it's this concept of they create this very broad category, toxic masculinity. And it ends up including things like competitiveness, aggression, a capacity for violence, stoicism, or not wanting to appear weak or vulnerable. And they list these things as toxic. And then when you start to call them on it, they then narrowly define it once again to, no, we just mean like abusive behavior. It's like, okay, well, that's not what you're teaching young men. I think we also see this within the public school system. I tell people all the time, one of the reasons why I homeschool is because public school was not created with your child in mind. Public school was created with the mass production of education in mind. And if you really look at our system, it was based off an 18th century Prussian model designed to make really good conscripts. So this idea, it is especially not conducive for young boys who typically have a lot of energy and are a lot of times more kinetic in the way that they learn. They have to physically do stuff. Well, when you create an educational environment where it's sit down, shut up, read this, repeat this, boys don't do well in that environment. And we're seeing this both within our public school system. We're seeing this within college. we have a university system, which I think has been overrun with a combination of critical theory and all of its various offshoots, combined with postmodernism. So that's this idea that there's no objective truth. There's no overarching meta narrative that we're supposed to live our life by. And then you put on top of this that everything is now based off of power structures, and men are the patriarchy. They represent, every man is now guilty for anything any man did at any point in the past. And what's fascinating about all of this is not only is it making men horribly unhappy, it's making women horribly unhappy. It is somewhat comical and tragic to watch liberal women go on social media and complain about, well, where are all the real men at? Where are all the men that want to be a protector and a provider? It's like, you told them they're toxic, and some of them believed you. So I think that's all a part of it. And then you take that kind of perfect storm and you add to it what they're calling the red pill and the manosphere. And now you have men coming on, where when I look at a lot of them, 75% of what they're saying, I totally agree with. 75% of get up, go to the gym, work out, read, become intellectually, capable, become professionally capable, become physically capable, because this is what you need to do as a man. But then when you look at the way they talk about relationships, it's this sort of thing where it's and you're going to become a top G, and the way you're going to be a top G is you're going to rack up a huge body count. And because that's what real men do. Real men are rich and successful and powerful, and they can beat up, they can beat somebody up, they can protect, they can provide, and that's what's going to get them a never-ending source of beautiful women that they're going to have a bunch of casual hookups with.
But all those beautiful women, by the way, should be virgins, right? I mean, that's the crazy part of the mentality is the woman needs to be the virgin. We want the high body count. I'm like, well, how do you get a virgin women then if you're just constantly sleeping with women? Doesn't make sense to me. This is the crazy part about your interaction with Justin Waller on whatever podcast, right? Is that again, Justin Waller, 75% of what Justin Waller says about various things, I can look at and say, I can appreciate where he's coming from and what he's saying. And then you pointed out the obvious contradiction in his argument, which is him looking at a bunch of club girls saying, if you do this, you're not going to be able to attract the sort of man that wants to provide for you, wants to protect you, wants to do all those other things. Okay, Justin, fair point. But you're also saying that you don't possess the discipline or the desire to actually be faithful to one woman. Well, then, okay, by process of elimination here, right, deductive reasoning, you're contributing to the sort of female behavior which you say is undesirable in a wife. And so you're contributing to the problem that you're attempting to address. And the thing I want men to understand is it's very easy to fall into this idea that because men that are maybe good looking, tall, and successful can go out and have a bunch of meaningless sex, that therefore that's the pinnacle, or that's a part of the pinnacle, or one of the designating factors of what makes you a high quality man. Not only is that not true, not only does that not only contribute to a bunch of things that are societally bad, and bad for women, it's also incredibly bad for men. You are accepting a diminished view of what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like, not to mention what a healthy sex life is supposed to look like, right? This whole idea that this is all about body count. Look, being a Green Beret, obviously I served in a unit where we had a lot of guys that took that view of the world, right? They were, they're in shape guys. They tend to be very, very confident. They can walk into a bar, they can walk into a club, and they don't got to spend the night alone if they don't want to, right? And they used to always tease me that, Nick, you got married at 19, and they used to always joke around. And I remember looking at a guy one night, and I kind of had enough of it. And I said, let me explain something to you, dude. I said, you have a bunch of meaningless hookups with a bunch of women that you don't care about, and then quite frankly don't care about you. I said, I've been with one woman, my wife, who I love, who I adore, who is gorgeous, who is beautiful, that I respect, that I am building a life with, having kids with, that, we have dreams together, and then we go out and we accomplish those things together, right? And one of the best gifts that I could ever give her is that when we're together, she never has to wonder if I'm thinking of somebody else. Never. And when you start to understand something about the way that women look at intimacy, the fact that she has that security, that she knows I am faithful to her and I am devoted to her and she's the only one,
I'm sorry, but that sows the seeds not only for a good relationship, that sows the seeds for incredible intimacy within that relationship. And because you've been busy racking up this body count, do you know how difficult it is for you to be able to have that with somebody one day? I mean, I believe in redemption. I believe in being able to recover from a past and be able to have a good marriage and a good relationship. But do you realize how much baggage you're bringing into that relationship, not just for you, but for her? So no, dude, I wouldn't trade my place and what I have with my wife for the meaningless hookups that you've had for 1 second. And he finally looked at me, he goes, you know what, dude? He goes, look, bottom line is we all wish we had what you had.
Wow.
I said, yeah, I know you do. I know you do.
Aww.
Thanks for admitting it.
So sad. 7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company. This is organic, gourmet coffee that's low acid and ethically sourced, and you're going to love 7 Weeks Coffee. You want that delicious steaming cup of coffee this fall? Why not order from 7 Weeks when you know that 10% of all the proceeds are going to go directly to the pro-life movement, to pregnancy resource centers to help moms and babies while you're drinking your delicious cup of coffee. So stop buying from coffee companies that don't support your values and start buying from 7weekscoffee.com and drink a delicious cup of coffee while you support the pro-life movement. Go to 7weekscoffee.com and you can use the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. Do you think it's a lack of, you were living that thing that deep down he's admitting, I want that. Mm-hmm. But do you think part of it too is, so many of us, millennials, certainly Gen Zers are raised in broken families. I think the numbers over 50% are not from intact families today. A fourth of all children in America are raised by single mothers. They don't even have a father who's involved in any serious way in their life. So how much of that is making men think that, okay, the way I relate to women romantically is kind of domination and power and just sort of like use, basically, like I'm going to use you for sex versus, respect and commitment and that like lifelong love story? So my parents got divorced when I was 3. My mom got remarried, got divorced again. My wife's parents got divorced when she was very young. The one thing that was really beneficial for both of us is that our parents didn't make excuses for the failures in their own relationships. They didn't pretend like, oh, this is just something that happens and sometimes it doesn't work out. They both admitted that it was a failure, and that it shouldn't be repeated. They also were Christians. My wife and I are strong Christians. And so we had this idea that, there is a way this is supposed to be done. And simply because it wasn't modeled for us doesn't mean it doesn't work. Or that it's honestly, not possible, right? Because you had the courage to believe it's possible for us, even though our parents struggled and failed, made these big errors. You had this courage at 19 and 20, which is remarkable, and you've been faithful to it to say, we're going to do it differently. Where did you get that courage? Well, so I don't know that it was courageous. I don't know that it was courageous, right? I think it was more. So when we were in high school, we both started recognizing that we were serious about one another. We started having conversations about what our expectations were. Like, we had conversations about what do we believe. And people always get on to me about this and say, well, Nick, as long as you have good communication, as long as you have all these other things that you guys talked about with respect to expectations and being honest and, et cetera, that why does the faith component matter so much? And I always tell people like, look, dude, I'm not going to give you the successful worldview without also giving you the creator of that successful worldview. We didn't come up with this on our own. Now, obviously, you can exhibit certain traits. You can set up certain rules for yourself, and there will be natural benefits as a result of those rules. The real question, though, is that ultimately when something difficult happens, when something bad happens, what keeps you there? And what keeps you there is you believe it's true. You believe it's correct and right and noble and beautiful and worth fighting for. And that's not something that you just get because two people had an agreement that they had similar life goals. That's something that you commit to because both of you have a commitment that there is such a thing as objective truth, objective morality. We believe in this and we're willing to fight for it because we believe in the promise of it. And one of the most wonderful things for my wife and I is that my oldest daughter is now engaged to a great guy, wonderful guy. We are so happy. My son, we didn't let any of our kids date until they were 18. People say, well, that's so harsh. Really? We saved our kids so much emotional trauma by telling them, not by telling them like, look, we don't want you to date because it's bad for you. We told them, we want you to have what we have.
We want you to have a relationship where you can see that mommy and daddy love each other, and that it is it is her and I against the world, right? And you know that because you've seen it. You've seen it your entire time growing up. And we want you to have that. And here's the things that you do to get it. But I would just say that part of it is about making a decision on what do you believe is true, and laying that good foundation and then building from there. But I think one of the problems that we've had within the Christian community is this idea that we talk about all the things that you're not supposed to do, and we don't do a good job of explaining, no, you don't do those things because it robs you of something that is so much better. And if you do these things, then this is what you get. And when you compare that with the meaningless trash that the world is trying to sell you on, I mean, look how unhappy everyone is as a result of what they're doing. I mean, yeah, it may look like fun when they're in the club, or it may look like fun when they're taking the pictures. I'm sorry, but Andrew Tate can never experience, with all those hookups, what I get to experience with my wife, because it's not just this. When we're together, it's not just response to stimuli, right? This is the woman I love and respect and am deeply passionate about, right? When we're building a life together, it's not that I have dreams and she has dreams and let's hope if they sync up. We built our dreams together. They're our dreams. And when we accomplish them together. And when we find troubles or when we find adversity, we accomplish it together. And people will look at me like, well, Nick, that's lucky for you. No, it isn't luck. If you're waiting around for luck to solve your world's problems, I got bad news for you. Your life's going to suck. It's a worldview. It's a way of viewing the various challenges and opportunities that come about, and knowing that her and I are one. We are a team, and that's it. And we also know what our roles are within that relationship. That's another thing it's amazing to me, this mindset that really tells women. Like my wife and I were talking about this at one point, and it was this whole idea that as I look at modern feminism, if you were to just sit me down and say, okay, Nick, here's all the tenets of modern feminism, I would be like, this was written by a licentious dude that just wanted to sleep around. So true. That would be the conclusion I would come to. The sexual revolution is for basically the worst. It's for male lust. I mean, it's designed for that end in mind. And it's not, I mean, women are not happy in the end. And yeah, men who live by lust are not happy either, to your point. So no one wins. And then you get abortion on demand out of it too. And just the sheer bloodletting of that. Well, and it diminishes, it by definition diminishes human life. When we start coming up with arbitrary rules by which life can be destroyed because you find it inconvenient, and that's what this boils down to. The idea that that's going to stay isolated within the question of abortion and not actually leak into every other aspect of life and humanity and human interaction, that's absurd. Like nobody who understands anything about human interaction or philosophy would tell you that you can take a certain sector of the population, dehumanize them and destroy them for no reason greater than you find them inconvenient, and then tell you that that's not going to have repercussions throughout the rest of society. Completely true. So what would be your practical advice? I mean, it sounds like you and your wife were both raised in broken homes. You get married at 19 and 20, and you have this love that you've shared. You've raised children together. You've built as you say, your dreams together. Okay, what practically, especially for men, let's just stay on men here. Like, what practically do they need the tools in order to have that success story? Because it sounds like you weren't necessarily raised with that modeled in your life, but you guys figured it out. There was aspects of it. Like I always say, like I'm very grateful for my father and my mother. I'm very sorry that they didn't stay married. But by the same token, I have 7 brothers and sisters I wouldn't have had if they had stayed together necessarily. And so, look, there's always God can always turn things for a noble purpose or a good outcome. And my dad and my mother were both still influential in my life and my morals, even if it wasn't reflected in their marriage. But here's what I would say for men specifically. Men need a mission. Men need a mission. Somebody said this once where they were talking about how they treat female depression and male depression, and the way they treat female depression tends to be with coming alongside someone and providing support and hearing them out and empathizing and sympathizing with them and providing a network of people that lets them know they're not alone. And when you try to treat male depression the same way, it doesn't work. Because men need a mission. We need a noble mission. You give us a noble mission and we'll crawl across broken glass to achieve it if we believe in it. And the thing that we try to tell young men is that, look, you do have a mission. You do have a purpose. You may be struggling to figure out what it is, but it's there. And for most men, maybe not all, but for most men, part of that mission will be getting married and having children. And there's this statement that people don't like anymore where they say that, men civilize the wild and women civilize men. And whether you like that or not or agree with it or not, there is an element of truth in that, because I know this much. There was a lot of things that I kind of wanted to do with my life and different objectives that I had, whether it was my military objectives or professional objectives. But if you want to know the thing that truly motivates me, my wife and my children and my responsibility to them, there is no philosophy, there's no patriotism, there's no country as deeply as I feel those other things. None of that ultimately compares to what I will do and what I will endure for the safety and love of my wife and my children. Mm-hmm. And when you do have a wife that has that similar worldview and brings out the absolute best in you, you will recognize a sense of accomplishment and purpose that you would never be able to accomplish in isolation. When you hold your child for the first time, I always tell guys whenever they're about to have a little girl for the first time, like, you think you're a tough guy, right? I've spent most of my life around tough guys, right? You think you're a tough guy, and then you have a little girl and you find out what an utter sap you are, right? A total and complete sap. Right. And then you have a son and you realize that, oh my gosh, I have to prepare this young man for the world. I have to prepare him to be a husband or a father one day. All of those things provide men with purpose and meaning. And then the question is what sort of moral precepts, what sort of guidelines are going to take them along this path to make sure that they're good men? Because here's the dirty little secret about toxic masculinity. When properly explained, there is such a thing as toxic masculinity, just like there's such a thing as toxic femininity. But here's here's the devil in the details that a lot of the people that use those terms don't like to admit. As soon as they say that, you know what they're admitting to? A binary. They're actually admitting that there are masculine traits and that there are feminine traits. And that when we look at things like aggression or competitiveness or a capacity for violence, these traits are morally neutral until they're actually put into action. So the man that uses that aggression or that competitiveness or that capacity for violence to take a woman's purse and run down the street, that is a negative manifestation of a masculine trait. But then when the other man steps in and stops him and returns it, those are positive manifestations of those masculine traits. So this is not a question of whether or not the traits will exist. It's a question of whether or not they will receive positive manifestations and positive outworkings or negative ones.
Carly Jean Los Angeles is ethically sourced, classic clothes, capsule clothing for the every woman. You're going to love the styles and the fact that when you buy a few pieces from CarlyJeanLosAngeles.com and you wake up in the morning, you have multiple different outfits that you can mix and match. So go to CarlyJeanLosAngeles.com today. They are also a pro-life company. They're a company that supports local pregnancy resource centers. So you are supporting the pro-life movement when you buy from CarlyJeanLosAngeles.com. And they've got some great November specials. So CarlyJeanLosAngeles.com, use the code Lila30 for 30% off your order. Check them out. You're going to love them. That's CarlyJeanLosAngeles.com. Here's the question about that, because I think so many men have been effectively emasculated. I mean, between pornography, between, you mentioned the school system, it's not good for young boys typically, like sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day. I know there's recess, but like just kind of the structure of it for young boys especially is not designed for their flourishing. Video games, just you can talk about even like the maybe environmental factors, birth control pills in our water that is literally depleting testosterone. I mean, all of this stuff, or, the additional estrogen there. I mean, do you think that the problem is that men aren't wild enough? I mean, the raw material of what men are, it has not only been disrespected and it's not properly channeled, but it's also it's been broken at large because of these societal factors.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, culture will eventually produce the sort of men it's asking for. And right now it's asking for weak, emasculated men. And it turns out nobody likes the results. I mean, I pointed this out and some people got mad with me. I said, isn't it fascinating that as soon as the T-80s rolled over the Ukrainian border, nobody was asking for the gender studies majors to show up and teach the Russians about tolerance and equity. They just wanted a dude that could shoot a Russian, right? They just wanted somebody that could actually protect their country. And this idea that we have in the West, where we've lived under so much security, so much prosperity, so much relative freedom from either want or danger, that it rises, it elevates this notion that those skills or those attributes are no longer required, that they're archaic, and that they're more dangerous than what they're worth. Okay, until you realize that emasculated men don't make for a safe society for women. Some of the worst abusers that you will ever see, some of the most depraved serial killers you ever see, were emasculated men, and they took it out on women. And so at no point do I want a society of weak, complacent, docile women, but this idea that you're going to get a better, safer society with emasculated men is just absurd, and it's been demonstrated throughout history. And
so
again,
how do we turn that back? I mean, what do we do with all the men who are, there's that statistic earlier, 63% of men versus only a third of women are single today. They're not, because of any number of reasons, they're not interested or they're not able to be in a relationship. And I'm not saying everyone is bound for sort of a marriage or a relationship, but I would say the large majority of people are. Biologically, it's the way we're wired. I think it's how we're designed. So some people aren't called to that, but more people are. So what about, what are with all this generation of men, you're talking about wanting them to direct their wildness towards greatness and the morality needed for that, which is so key. But what about just recreating or sparking the wildness to begin with, in a good way?
Well, so I think it's a couple of things. Like, I think John Lovell does a great job of this in his book.
He does, Poet. Yeah. He's awesome.
He does a great job on this. Matt Boudreau. There's other guys in this sphere, and I think what you're starting to see is something of a I don't know if competition is the right place, but basically different paths where young men are going to go to get advice. And some of it is what they, refer to as kind of this secular manosphere, where again, it's the workout, be professional, do all these other things, be intellectual, have good, be intellectually formidable. But then with respect to its concept of relationships, it's broken. And then it's usually rooted in something of a hedonistic philosophy that doesn't ultimately make sense. Then you've also got this view where it's kind of the scholarly approach, where it's telling young men that there's things that they have to prioritize, and they have to be good and they have to be noble. But what young men really need to see is they need to see men that do a good job of combining the warrior and the scholar, or the warrior and the poet, as John Lovell would describe it. They don't want to just be lectured to. If you're gonna offer an alternative, then they want to see somebody that they believe is formidable along those masculine lines. And so I think where I'm approaching this from the Christian perspective, it's about reopening this whole idea of what does it mean to be a strong Christian man? Well, a strong Christian man isn't weak. A strong Christian man is intellectually formidable, professionally formidable, physically formidable, and they're emotionally formidable as well. Like I always say that my wife worded it best. I was trying to capture this, where I was saying, like, we don't like to be vulnerable, we don't like to be weak, and she goes, yeah, but babe, you got to be able to show us tenderness. Like there's a tenderness that you display. And she described it for me, and it helped me understand it and articulate it better. She goes, babe, there's a tenderness that you display toward me. There's a tenderness that you display toward our daughters that the rest of the world doesn't get, but every once in a while they get to see a glimpse of it. She goes, that's really important. That's really important. And I do think that's critical. The other side of it, and a lot of young men, will share this story when they ask you about something that was formative in their young lives. So again, I didn't get to grow up with my father as much as I would have liked to, but I got to spend the summers with him. And my dad was a homicide detective. And one day he said, "You want to go into work?" Like, yeah, I want to go into work. That's cool, right? And we're sitting there, and there was this situation where there was this guy, cuffed up, sitting down, and he looked at me wrong, at least in my dad's view. And my dad just immediately shot him this glare and said, get your head down. And the guy went back down. And I saw this glimpse of the man that dangerous people saw in my father. Right? It was never directed toward me.
So he never raised his voice with you?
No. He did. Okay. He would raise. See that this is
but
the
not
part
like
that's
that.
so.
Not
this
like
is the
that.
part that is so critical, and I think people don't properly understand. No, he is my dad. My dad had the capacity to scare the crap out of me, right? Like he would raise his voice at me, and he would use a very stern look and the whole deal and whatnot. It's not like he was just super gentle and kid gloves with me, not at all. He wasn't abusive though. So I saw his anger, but I never perceived a threat. Right. I saw in that moment, and I can't illustrate this enough. It wasn't anger he was demonstrating toward that person. It was actually calculated. It was calculated to display to him that he was a threat because he had something to protect. And man, that stuck with me. That split second of seeing the look on his face, the tone, his gesture, and how another dangerous man responded to it. Right. That stuck with me. That the threats in the world need to see that in me whenever they're threatening the things that I love. They need to know that I am dangerous for them. But my wife and my children, they never see that. They may see dad angry, they may see dad frustrated, but they never perceive me as a threat to them. But the same token, they do know I'm a threat on their behalf. And young men are looking for that to be demonstrated in a positive way, because when they see it, it makes sense and instantly makes sense to them that yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. And this is the job that men are supposed to do. And I want to be that sort of man.
And what's so powerful about that, as you said earlier, is it's ordered to something. There's a purpose. You use the word mission to all of it. Like, what's the mission of your ability to be strong and threatening? It's not to dominate your family, right? It's to protect and provide for your family. And so when you have your mission in order, your purpose in order, as a man or a woman, everything can get aligned around that. And there's such freedom in that. And that's, I think, where the joy comes in, and the peace can come in, the happiness. People actually experience that real happiness because they're living their mission, and it's a mission of service and ultimately of other people.
No, I think that's absolutely correct. People flourish. I would say this: children, marriages, they flourish when there's an element of love, respect, and security. And the man is supposed to provide the security. And it's amazing because they've been told, well, no, you don't do that. It's equal. It's whatever. I was talking to, I always make it a point whenever I'm talking to someone that, lets me know, oh, I just got engaged or whatnot. I always take that as an opportunity to say, look, marriage is great. I don't care what, pop culture tells you about marriage or what Hollywood tells you about marriage. Marriage is wonderful. I absolutely love my wife. I mean, it's an adventure. It's an adventure. Your life doesn't end when you get married. It begins. Because I just want to encourage people. And this one young woman, where I was up in DC for something with some friends, and I think there was a conference going on in town or whatnot. And so she told me that. I said, oh, being married is great. And she said, oh, how long have you been married? And at that point, I think I'd been married like 15 years or something. And we're talking. And I'm talking about what I love about being a husband and what I love about being a father. And as I'm describing this, she looks at me and she goes, oh, we don't subscribe to those traditional gender roles. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, can I ask you a question? She said, sure. I said, let's say you and your fiance are here in DC and you're walking out, you've just had a lovely dinner together. And as you're walking back to the car, a guy jumps out of an alleyway with a knife. Now, in one of these scenarios, your fiance jumps in between you and your attacker. And in the other scenario, he jumps behind you. In which scenario are you more attracted to your fiance? And she goes, well, that's not fair. I said, no, it is fair. Will it ever happen? Probably not. Odds are it won't. Well, although it's DC, who knows? Odds are it isn't. But in your mind, you want to know where he would jump. You want to know what he would do, and you want to be confident on his level to protect you, because it makes you feel good, not only because he loves you, but because he's capable. And you can sit here and pretend all day long that doesn't matter. But whenever you're asked the question, it does. Not because of the high degree of probability, because what it says about him, what it says about you, and what it says about the nature of your relationship. So can we just stop pretending and just embrace the things that are different about men and women, and embrace that when a man and woman come together in marriage, the various strengths that they bring to the table benefits not only them individually, but benefits each other and completes one another in a way that wouldn't be possible in isolation. Can we just do that? Because it turns out when we do embrace those things, people are happy. And when we fight against them, and it's a form of rebellion against reality, not just and a rebellion, I would argue, against God. Right. When we fight against it, nobody's happy.
Right.
So to your question, how do we teach young men to do it? Well, the first step is do it in your own life. We can sit here and talk about it all day long, but the best argument for what you believe is how you live your life. And when you live it that way and other people see it and they see the chaos that's taking place from the alternative, that's... You can point out the lie all day long, but people will hold on to a convenient lie all day long if they don't actually have a truth that they can then rally behind.
EveryLife.com is America's pro-life baby products company. Isn't that great that we have a company finally that creates great quality products that are perfect for your little one? Diapers and wipes. You're going to love EveryLife.com. They have a great subscription service. If you're done supporting diaper companies that are hostile to your values or don't support your values, EveryLife.com is the solution. Go to EveryLife.com today. You can order your diapers and your wipes for that little one in your life that you love. And EveryLife.com, you can use the code Lila at checkout for 10% off your order. So for men, I think you shared a lot, and I think you're spot on about, the natural role a man has and, what men need today. And you mentioned the importance of mentors, which I totally agree with. I think in many ways, the crisis of masculinity and femininity is a crisis of mentorship. Like, we need role models that can help us and accompany us. And that's why I love the work you're doing, because you're basically providing an important element of that through the work that you're doing online and, sharing all of these messages. But, gender roles, like there's the role of the man and then there is a role for women. And so how do you see, you have daughters, you share some funny advice online sometimes about like advice for raising girls. What is the role of a woman? And what do you think modern women don't get today?
I think a lot of modern women have just been lied to. And again, part of it goes back to this whole idea that the way to be a powerful woman is to be a crappy man.
So true.
But here's what I would say.
Be in the boardroom, don't have kids, sleep around and don't have regrets. Like, be the worst man out there. I mean, that was the sexual revolution project, like turn women into the worst version of the Playboy man. Yeah. And, what has been the result of that? A lot of suffering for a lot of people.
Yeah, not the least of which is women. So here's what I would say, and I try to be careful about this because obviously, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the experience is like to be a woman. I can tell you what I appreciate about my wife. My wife is incredibly nurturing. She also has incredible discernment. The world talks about women's intuition. I think in Christianity we talk more about discernment. But this idea that one of the things I learned very early on about my wife was that she picked up on things that I was oblivious to. Right. And I remember initially being kind of young and inexperienced and arrogant. She would say, I don't have a good feeling about this, or I don't know about this person, or whatever it is. And be like, well, why? Explain it. What's your reasoning? And sometimes she'd be like, Nick, I just have a bad idea. And I'm like, well, you're being too hard on him, or you're being, you're being, emotional or whatever. No, she wasn't. She was picking up on things I wasn't. And some people offer biological reasons or evolutionary reasons for that. Whatever it is, she has incredible discernment, and I've really grown to trust it. Especially when it comes to relationships or partnerships that you might, business partnerships or whatever it is. Like, she has incredible discernment. She, like I said, very nurturing. And that's nurturing toward the children, but that's also nurturing toward me. One of the things that, obviously I was in the military. I was a combat veteran. The reason why I have the great relationship I have with my children is because of a lot of the work my wife put into that. I was gone a lot. The first 10 years of our marriage, I was gone for half of it. Between training, between combat deployments, between training deployments, whatever it is, I was gone a lot. And I saw as some women in that situation dealt with the absence through infidelity, or dealt with the absence through bitterness, or would display their frustration in front of their kids about where their husband was, their father was. Not my wife, man. Every time I came home, my kids were happy to see me because when they couldn't be around me, she kept the memory of me alive with them the entire time in a way that only she could do.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Really is. I also appreciate my wife's intelligence and her perspective on things, and this goes in part with the discernment. I like to joke around with people. They're like, you think I'm a firebrand until you meet Tina, and then you realize that, man, Mama Bear is there. She also she embraces her femininity, which is to say that my wife is my wife's a very beautiful woman, and she likes to be beautiful for me, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And some people look at that as superficial, and I don't know how to explain that men there is something about the beauty of a woman that just inspires us in ways that we can't explain. And that beauty is not only found in the physical, it's also found in the character. I remember early on, one of the things that attracted me to my wife is her sense of right and wrong and justice was, when the popular kids would be picking on someone or whatnot, Tina would be the one to stand up and just read them the riot act. Like, how dare you? And it wasn't just her physical beauty, it was the integrity that she displayed. So I think there's so many feminine traits along gentleness and nurturing and discernment, which also have positive and negative manifestations. Like, nurturing can have a negative manifestation if it becomes, babying or codependency. Discernment can have a negative manifestation if it manifests itself in manipulation. But she's always used these things in such a way as to help us in our marriage and to help our children and to help them avoid danger and to give them good advice and to bring them up to know that they are secure and that they are loved and they're protected. So all of those attributes are things that when I look at my wife, who has been very dynamic at home and within our marriage and with our kids, homeschooling our kids, managing the home. My wife is the sort of woman, when you look at Proverbs 31, my wife is the sort of woman that if there is a YouTube video, she knows how to do it. We spent a lot of the first 4 years.
That's impressive. There's a lot of YouTube videos for how to do the home and homesteading, because I know that's what you guys are into now. So
I know I'm rambling on, but whenever you ask me what I love about my wife,
I love it. No, this is a great. We need more of this, because what I love about what you're saying too, Nick, is that you're sharing specifics, obviously, but there's sort of principles that are underlying, because people will the pushback against this, right, coming from maybe the modern woman or even man. It's like, well, every personality is different. Some women seem more masculine in some parts of their personality. Some men are more sort of naturally empathetic, whatever. But you're speaking to sort of principles that can be applied across personalities that really make, I think, the feminine come alive for any woman. And it's just beautiful that you have this in your wife and that you celebrate it publicly in your wife, because that in and of itself too, I think is missing, like, more celebration of husbands of their wives of their husbands publicly. I don't know. I think it's a great example to people listening and to me.
Well, I think it's necessary. Again, when you ask the question, how do we convince young men? How do we convince young women of a different way of thinking about these things? Well, again, the argumentation is a component of it. Like, you are an incredibly effective advocate, and you're also willing to go into places where you're going to be the only one with your opinion, and you've done an excellent job being able to articulate the sort of worldview that we're discussing, the sort of the beauty of life, the beauty of a certain way of living and thinking about the world, and that's incredibly inspirational to people, and it should be able to provide an example of, again, a strong manifestation of femininity, one that is intellectually rigorous.
But I'll say, since becoming married, we're 5 years in only, so we're behind you guys, but I will say that the rootedness of becoming married, of belonging to my husband and he belongs to me, and what he's taught me just by the gift of his presence, like being that provider, protector for me, it has given me more strength and courage, and really even the power to even care more about the work that I'm doing, because I have this unconditional love and foundation from my husband. Now, of course, I had that from God before, but I get to have this living manifestation of it in my life. So I just think that's the power of a husband's love, and it's the power of, the wife. Obviously, I hope my love can give him, that rootedness too in my own way. But our ability to go out and change the world is, if we're called to marriage, I think it's maximized by the family project, by the love of a marriage.
Absolutely. To your point on the other side of that, the fact that I know that my wife has my back no matter what, it actually allows you to it allows you to confront difficulty, challenges, danger. On some level, it allows you to assume risk because you know that the most important parts of your life, like for me, it's my relationship with God, then my relationship with my wife. When those things are certain. Just the world's not as scary. Like I don't know how to say it. The world's just not as scary a place. And again, I think it inspires men to courage, and it also, I think it inspires women to courage as well when they know that they're secure in that relationship. Because my wife is a formidable woman. She anybody that has an image of my wife as just being kind of, docile and like, oh, okay, honey. Like, no, my wife is also the one that I bounce ideas off with and can, and contend with in a positive way where we're making each other better through the process. Because ultimately, this is something Jordan Peterson talks about where he says, be careful who you share good news with and be careful who you take criticism from. Right. It's perfectly healthy to take constructive criticism. It is an incredible thing to be able to take criticism from someone who absolutely loves you and just wants you to be everything that they know you can be, because sometimes criticism is necessary. And I mean this in the most positive and constructive way. I'm not talking about biting. I'm not talking about nagging. I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about someone that's willing to sit down and be like, babe, I'm telling you, you need to be thinking about this. You need to be praying about this. How can I pray for you? There's a certain degree of accountability that has to exist within a marriage that your wife or your husband is uniquely suited to be able to provide, provided that it's purely because they love you and they want you to be the absolute best version that God has for you.
It's beautiful. Okay, so for people listening who maybe they're not married yet, or they are married and they're going through a hard time, or they might go through a hard time in the future, I do want to get some of your thoughts on this before we wrap up here, because we've talked about gender roles, talked about the value of marriage and the roles even within a marriage to some degree. But what do you do practically when you hit hard times? And maybe let's just start with a woman. Like, you're a woman and you're wrestling with a situation where you don't feel like that man, your husband, is being the leader you want him to be. I was reading this, I think it was a Reddit post. Reddit is full of these really sad stories a lot of the time. But I think she was describing maybe it was a forum on something on marriage, but it was one of these online forums, right? And she's sharing about how her husband is basically addicted to these games, like video games, or some sort of phone game. And anyways, he's a good man. He works, he tries to be, present to the kids when he is there, right? But he's spending exorbitant amounts of time and money just kind of whittling his life away as she sees it. And she feels like it's not fair to her. It's not fair to the kids. It's damaging. What is the response? What would you tell, or what would you encourage a woman to do in trying to kind of bring out that leader in the man that she's with?
I think there's a couple of things, and I'm not going to pretend this is easy, because it's not easy in either direction. When the first thing, which is kind of the most obvious, is you tend to get more of what you reward in any sort of relationship. So when you are showing appreciation for various things, you tend to get more of it. By the same token, there will be things that are potentially negative attributes, which then develop into habits and then hopefully not addictions. And I think when you're approaching something from a biblical worldview, one of the things that I always tell people that is so wonderful about a biblical worldview is that when I say I'm the head of the household, it doesn't mean I'm the head under my own authority. Which means that there's an objective standard to which my wife can pull out scripture, or she can look at something I'm doing and she can go like, babe, this isn't right. And if she's right and I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. And then the question is, okay, what do we do about this? How do we, how do we overcome this particular challenge? What sort of mechanisms do we put in place to both disincentivize bad habits and incentivize good ones? I think one of the toughest things is when you tell people, I don't like this, stop doing it. Look, if we take something out of our life that is not productive, we better replace it with something that is. And so that's part of the question is how do you either set up appropriate boundaries, and then how do you actually replace something that is becoming destructive? How do you replace it with something that is productive? And then how do you encourage the sort of behavior that you want to see more of? And then for men, a lot of things is, look, we definitely want to feel like we're being there for you and we're being there for our children. It's tough when we feel guilty, and sometimes the initial response you might get from a man is, well, I do this and I do this and I do that. And I think one of the most important things is to acknowledge that, like, again, if he's a good husband and he really does try and he is working, he's providing, it's like, you're a wonderful protector, you're a wonderful provider, you make us feel safe, you take care of our needs. The reason why we want more from you is because of all of those things. And right now we feel like we're having to share you too much with this other thing. And we want more because we love you and because we respect you and because we need more from you. And it's not out of any lack of appreciation for what you're already doing. Can we do more of this, right? Like, is there more things that we can do that gets us out of the house and away from the console, or is there more things that we can do that would allow us to have that time with you, so that the kids get the benefit of everything that you have to teach them, so that I get the benefit? Is the other thing too is, look, men like intimacy, and so all of those things I think are ways that a wife can positively interact with a husband. And look, be prepared for some sense of rejection. And to some degree, like I've had to do that, where Tina's brought things to my attention before where I felt a sense of rejection. I felt defensive. And maybe my initial reaction wasn't great, but I came around, right? I was like, babe, I'm sorry. You're right. And I am wrong. And I should not have responded that way. I should not have reacted that way. But yeah, how do we do this? How can I do this in such a way that will address this issue? And being open to talking about that. And so that can be difficult. I will say that if a man feels secure in your love and he feels appreciated for the things that he is doing, it's a little bit easier to address some of the other things and to improve. If we just feel like, you never spend any time with us, or you never do this, or, when it's like, look, if the guy's working 50, 60 hours a week and the game is something that he uses to kind of disconnect because he just can't shut down his mind. And all he's hearing now is you never, like, oh, the moment you hear that, like, what do you mean I never? On the other hand, when it's, you are a great protector, you are a great provider, I appreciate so much of you, this is consuming a lot of your time. Is there something else that can we do something else that allows you to be more engaged with us? Not because we don't recognize how stressed out on all the work that you do, but because we love you and because we want more time with you. It's valuable to us and we want more time with you. I think that's a better approach. I'm not saying a guy's always going to give a good initial reaction, but ultimately he's going to recognize that, my wife and my kids, they need me. They want more time with me. How lucky am I that they want that? So I think that's valuable. Can I say another thing from the guy's perspective? Yeah. Men are, I will say this, men who have been trained to be good men and to be sacrificial in our love and our leadership, because biblical leadership for a man and their family is supposed to be servant leadership. We are supposed to love our wives the way Christ loved the church and gave his life up for it. One of the things I always explain to men and to women when I'm explaining the biblical worldview of marriage is like, yes, I am the leader of my household. I make no apologies for that. But that comes with a tremendous amount of responsibility, and up to and including my life for my wife's. Mm-hmm. And people say, oh, you've got to sacrifice everything for your wife. No. What it means is I am willing to sacrifice myself for my wife because I love her. And that's part of that noble mission. I'm willing to sacrifice myself for my kids if it's necessary. What that also means is that sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it is difficult for us to articulate things to our wives that we would like to see changed in her behavior. Mm-hmm. because we don't want to offend. We never want to make our wives feel like they're anything less than what we want, or, we want them to know that they're the woman of our dreams. But if there's things where it's like, sweetheart, can we change this, or can we do this, or what about this? And Tina and I had this conversation once. I said, well, sweetheart, are you allowed to tell me things that could potentially offend me, but I'm not allowed to tell you things that could potentially offend you? Is that how this is going to work?
Yeah, it's a fair question.
And she said, and again, my wife, another thing I love about my wife is she said, that's fair. That's fair. You have to be able to say things to me. And her one rule for me has always been, just always talk to me like I'm the woman that you love. And even if I get frustrated with what you say, I'll remember that we had this conversation. And to her credit, she always has. And the wonderful thing I love about that is that obviously when we talk about logic versus emotion, I always try to stress this to men. Having a visceral emotional reaction to something is not a weakness unless you are dominated by it. No. That emotion that you have at a particular thing is an invitation to thought. It's an invitation to reason and to logic and to understanding. When your wife is more emotionally sensitive to something, it's in part because biologically and everything else, she has to be more in tune to the emotions and the way things are affecting people within the environment that she controls. She has to be in tune to the way that her children see things. And so when she has an emotional reaction to something, that's not a weakness unless it dominates her entire reasoning. If anything, it provides insight into where a discussion needs to go or where a logical thought process needs to begin, because that emotional component of that discussion and that relationship is so critical. So don't throw it in her face when she has an emotional reaction to something. It should indicate to you that there's something that needs to be discussed. And then both of you sit down with an understanding of both the emotional and the logical component, and you figure out, why does this exist? And so again, another thing I give my wife incredible credit for is that we have this in agreement that truth is truth. And if there is an emotional reaction to something, whether it's offense or whether it's hurt or whether it's something else, we go beyond the asking, okay, why is that? Okay, can I say something better? Am I just wrong in the way that I'm analyzing something? But if we're not willing to have those conversations, then you're going to have things that at first just kind of annoy you, that then become sources of bitterness and resentment. And so there has to be a safety and security that, once again, sweetheart, you and I against the world. You and I against the world. It is always us. There is no just me or just you. It's always us. But both of us have to be able to come to the other one and be honest when I think this is a problem and we need to address it. So I would say to women, sometimes men have a hard time articulating the way we feel about something. But if you want us to be more emotionally secure in the way that we discuss either vulnerabilities with you or the way we discuss things that are bothering us, sometimes sometimes you might have to take that little bit of offense or hurt to be able to get beyond it. Now again, it's still on men we need to do a better job of articulating what it is that we're experiencing. But ultimately, I want to be the best version for my wife possible. I want to be the best version. I want to be the man of her dreams, right? And she wants to be the woman of my dreams. And there's marriages and life go through different stages. That doesn't mean you stop wanting to be that for each other. And so being willing to sit down and talk with it, but always having the commitment that it's you and I against the world, right? If necessary. We love and respect one another. And now we're going to get to the bottom of what this problem is, and we're going to figure out together what's the best way to address it. And sometimes it does include one party or the other saying, not only I'm sorry, but I was wrong, and I'm going to do it differently. And I've had those moments where my wife has looked at me and said, I was wrong. You were right. I shouldn't have done it that way. I shouldn't have reacted that way. And it is just this tremendous relief that comes over me that she still loves me and she hears what I say. And because she wants to be better for me, she's willing to hear it. And I do the same thing for her. Honey, you were right. I was wrong. I should not have done that. It was not respectful. It was not honoring to you. And it won't happen again, or I'll do this. And the security that comes from that is just incredible. And that's what it allows you to get as close to perfection in your marriage as possible.
This powerful stuff, the power of I'm sorry. And then also, I love you and thank you. It kind of having that foundation of appreciation.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have already like that back and forth of appreciation and that taking the time to really value and enjoy each other when tough conflicts come or, tough times come or misunderstandings inevitably come, you're already kind of operating from that rocky place.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's something that you guys have prioritized from the beginning, is like really having that appreciation piece there. And that, I think, makes such a huge difference.
And if there's one other thing I just add as a final caveat to that, when you have issues with your spouse, they're with your spouse. That is not something that you like. I don't go to my buddies and talk smack about my wife. I don't go to my buddies and talk about the things I wish she would do differently. And she doesn't do that with her friends about me. If we have issues with us, we have issues with us. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have close friends that, like we're dedicated to their marriage being successful. They're dedicated to and we pray for each other and we have that. But when there's issues, there are issues. They're nobody else's issues. Nobody else gets them. That's one of the things I like to say is like, no. My issue with my wife on this particular thing is something that we're going to work together. And the moment anyone else tries to butt themselves into that conversation, get the hell out. You don't belong there. That's for us. Like I'm almost, what's the word? I'm protective.
Territorial.
I'm territorial.
In a good way.
About any issues that we're having.
So don't go to Reddit is what you're saying.
No, don't go to Reddit.
Don't go to Reddit.
Yeah.
I mean, but maybe go to the wise, couple or the wise counselor. But the point is like, don't blow off steam with your friends, like about your most cherished other half, the one that you're one flesh with. Yeah. I think it's a betrayal of yourself, actually, as much as it is a betrayal of your spouse, to gossip about one spouse or to complain about one spouse. So powerful words. All right, Nick, this has been so awesome. Where can people find you're giving, truth bombs or, great advice to men and to women. And then you have the parenting advice. So there's a lot more to your work, obviously. And then obviously you're representing the great state of Virginia. God help them, as God help California. But where can people find your work?
So we have a podcast called Making the Argument. We also have another program we do called the Y Minutes. And then all you have to do is Google Nick J. Freitas. And, we have a pretty good presence on Instagram. We try to get content out there pretty frequently on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, X, and everything else. But yeah, those are the places to find me. And if I could just say too, again, as a tribute to you, your husband, your marriage, the work that Live Action does. It's something. This is an issue that my wife and I is very near and dear to my wife and I, and we've always been incredibly grateful for not only the work that you do, but the way that you articulate it within the cultural space and how important that is. Because ultimately, if we do want not just on the issue of abortion, if we want a society that truly values innocent human life and wants to protect it and wants it to flourish, then it begins at its most vulnerable stage. And as much as that is a legislative battle, it will always first and foremost be a cultural battle and humanitarian one, and you do it very well. And so thank you for that.
Thank you, Nick. Well, thanks for lending your important voice to it, which you do frequently. So it's needed. We need strong men out there fighting for marriage and family. So thank you.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Lila Rose Podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening, on podcast app, or if you're on the YouTube channel, don't forget to click that subscribe button. And if you're listening on podcast app, don't forget to leave us 5 stars and a review. This will help the podcast reach more people. Thanks so much, and we'll see you guys next time.